Record 19, Side 1, Lesson number 19, the 19th lesson, Practical section, Planning a journey in Britain. The UK has a very important and extensive road and rail network, as well as numerous airports where aeroplanes from other parts of the country, besides those from abroad, may land. Millions of people travel by bus and train every day of the week, whether they go to work in the town or travel on business from one part of the country to another. It is possible to reach any part of the country by car or train, and so during summer many people go into the country or to the seaside for pleasure at the weekend. It is perhaps more convenient to make weekend trips by car, because there is no part of Great Britain more than 75 miles from the sea as the crow flies. But even those who have no private means of transport find there are excellent services arranged by the railways and bus companies to allow people to visit famous beauty spots or particular festivals and exhibitions, especially during summer. However, for the majority of foreign visitors, it appears that London is the beginning and end of their travelling in Britain. Very often, students cannot permit themselves the luxury of travelling in Britain, but find London so full of interest that the remainder of the country seems to be less important. It is not very easy to organize a journey through Britain, though one might say that travelling by car would certainly be the most convenient method of doing so. If we have a month at our disposal, we shall be able to visit many interesting and beautiful parts of the country. But otherwise, it would be advisable to choose a few places which we really wish to visit and plan our travelling according to the time available. It is superfluous to mention any of the many places in and around London which are probably well known to you already, at least in name, even if you haven't yet had the good fortune to see them for yourself. One of the many bus services, or the Underground, will take you to them. The time of the year we visit Britain is also important, however. But let us imagine we arrive there in summer. What are we going to do after we have seen London, or, as some people say, done London? Are we interested in cultural festivals, traditional customs, sports, exhibitions, or simply in visiting town and country places of interest, such as cathedrals and other historically important buildings. This must be decided beforehand if we are to use our time to best advantage. Plan your holiday well and make as few changes afterwards as possible, while still keeping your program flexible. Information of all kinds can be had on request from any travel organization, including the British Travel Association, which publishes a useful little book entitled A Calendar of Events in Britain. This covers all kinds of happenings during the year, from horse racing to music festivals and photography exhibitions. Many of the schools in England which today look after the interests of the foreign student of English organize trips to various parts of the country, and this method has the added advantage that the student also has the opportunity to improve his or her English under the supervision of qualified people. Plan carefully before you leave, and you will find that your visit to England will be enjoyable and will help you to understand the people and their way of life much better than you would from books. Now, here are a few English idioms which you may have noticed in our lessons, along with some new ones. Learn them by using them. As the crow flies, in a straight line. A family tree, chart tracing one's ancestors. A fellow creature, another human being. Some common comparisons: as black as coal, as bold as a lion, as blind as a bat, as bright as day.
Side 2, Grammatical section. Relative pronouns and clauses, second part. Non-defining relatives. In lesson 14, we discussed the pronouns and their uses in defining relative clauses. In this lesson, we shall see what non-defining relative clauses are and which pronouns to use in them. The name itself tells us what non-defining relative clauses are. In fact, they add something to the sentence which is not essential for its comprehension or completeness. It does not define the noun it follows, but adds something to the information already given. It is important to remember A. That the non-defining relative phrase is preceded and followed by a comma. The form is more common in written than in spoken English. B. The objective case is never omitted in this form. The pronouns used are For persons, subject who, object whom or who, with preposition whom, possessive whose. Here are some examples. My friend John, who is a good swimmer, found the current very strong. Mary Smith, whom you met at my party, is Peter's girlfriend. Joe Black's teacher, of whom you must have heard, is leaving for America next week. Mr. Jones, whose sister married a rich industrialist, lives in a modest cottage at the end of the village. For things, subject which, object which, with preposition which, possessive of which or whose. Note the relatives in the following non-defining clauses. Your history book, which was on the table this morning, has disappeared. Bologna University, which is the oldest in Europe, has many different colleges. War and Peace, of which I have heard much, is a very long book. His story, of which I don't believe a word, throws very little light on the mystery. Where verbs which take a preposition or an adverb after them are used, it is not usual to separate the latter from the verb. See the examples that follow. To look after, to cut down, to listen to. The Brown's dog, which we looked after last summer, is always in our garden now. The Christmas tree, which was cut down in December, has taken root again. Nicholas Nickleby, which we listened to on the radio, was most interesting. In the spoken language, it is more common to use two simple sentences or a conjunction than a non-defining relative clause. For example, those people whom I have observed carefully are doing nothing. This sentence will normally be spoken as, I have observed those people carefully. They are doing nothing. Your daughter, whom I saw in the park, has grown very tall. Spoken, I saw your daughter in the park. She has grown very tall. The connective relatives are for persons who, for things which. Which is sometimes used for a whole clause. It is not possible to use that as a connective relative. Here are one or two examples of connectives. I spoke to John, who told me of his ill luck. Mary studied the lesson, which was very easy. He reached the top of the tree which was a very difficult thing to do. Defining relative clauses, second part. Sometimes a relative clause can be substituted by an infinitive when the relative clause tells how to use something. Listen to the following examples. Here is something which you can spend, or more commonly, here is something to spend. Before his examination, he has many books which he must read, or more commonly, before his examination, he has many books to read. When, in this case, there is a relative pronoun with a preposition, it is normal to place it after the infinitive. Someone to speak to instead of someone to whom to speak. Some means to travel by instead of some means by which to travel.